Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Sil Stober. On the 27th of February 2024, the federal government introduced the Expatriate Employment Levy, a mandatory financial contribution imposed on employers who hire expatriate workers in Nigeria, requiring them to pay $15,000, it's about £12,000, for a director and $10,000 for other employees. The move is meant to encourage foreign companies to employ more Nigerian workers. Now, some of the objectives of the EEL are to promote skills transfer and knowledge sharing, balance economic growth and social welfare, enhance collaboration between the public and private sectors, and address demographic shifts. The EEL, which is to be administered by the Nigerian Immigration Service, will be implemented from the 15th of March. The Nigerian Immigration Service has communicated that the last date of compliance is 15th of April. Now, the initiative aims to narrow the wage disparities between expatriates and Nigerian employers, between economic advancement and social well-being, strengthen collaboration between the public and private sectors. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will explore the launch of the Expatriate Employment Levy in Nigeria. But before we get to meet our guests, let's see this report put together by correspondent Musa Abubakar.
Nigeria's drive to bring in foreign exchange earnings is gathering momentum as the federal government continues to seek ways to raise income. The Expatriate Employment Levy is the latest initiative by the Ministry of Interior designed to impose on organizations which engage the expatriate workers in Nigeria to pay a levy.
The main essence is to be sure that if you are bringing an expatriate to work in Nigeria, it should be a job that no Nigerian has the skill to do. Balancing of employment opportunities between Nigerians and expatriates. And of course, closing wage gaps between expatriates and the Nigerian labor force by making it more attractive to hire Nigerians.
It is said that the levy will be computed at $15,000 for every expatriate on director level and $10,000 for those on other levels. The objective of the program is to promote skills transfer and knowledge sharing, balance economic growth and social welfare, as well as enhance collaboration between public and private sectors, amongst other advantages.
Revenue that will accrue, I believe the minister, having thought through this, will ensure that if somebody must remain in Nigeria for 10 years, he can't have any excuse not to be able to train a Nigerian to take over that job. Nigeria jobs for Nigeria, that should be the slogan.
That good effort is being made to retool, re-engineer the finances of the country, and make growth our hallmark. I've been further assured that the project has the capacity of plugging loopholes and gaps that have bedeviled the country in dealing with security challenges.
While the initiative is received with mixed feelings by some people, the federal government is determined to continue with the quest to explore ways to improve the country's revenue. In Abuja, I am Musa Abubakar.
And that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's get to meet our guests. I'd like to welcome to this program Professor Ken Ife, development economist and public policy analyst. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're joined also by Engineer Umar Binder, a former Director General of NOTAP. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
All right. And let me also welcome to this program Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, a professor of communications at Bayes University, Abuja, and a public affairs analyst. Thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Right. As is with NTA Tuesday Live, at some point in time, You can join in the conversation in the studio, but when it's that time, we'll remind you of the process and the procedure. Now back to the present, let's begin to look at the issues. And there's been a lot of discussions on the Expatriate Employment Levy, which is expected to be a game changer and earn much needed revenue for Nigeria, while at the same time ensuring the transfer of skills. But let's begin to look at it in its full ramifications. Professor Ken Ife, let's start with you. What's your idea about this?
The spirit of this policy is a good one, the spirit, because we all want to invest more on human resource development and our human capacity. And we do want to transfer these skills as quickly as possible. But I have some grave reservations on some aspect of it, because I'm worried that I have adequate consultation of all the key stakeholders been carried out. And have we actually vigorously identified all the risks? And there are so many risks. And when we take the risks one after another, it becomes very important that we deal with the consequences of some of those risks. For example, there is a risk of, in bilateral, plurilateral, and multilateral agreements, there are provisions there that we have to consider. For example, if you are looking at WTO related, the first thing is everybody wants to have a reasonable interval between enactment and going into force. That's a fundamental requirement. So on that score, people are going to say you need to look at the time scales in which you want to implement that. The second one is, I've seen arguments about legality and constitutionality, where it is argued that Section 59 of the Constitution may well be violated, because it does require that provisions, any new provisions of levy or tax or duties and all of those need to have legal backing by way of act of parliament or amendment of subsequent acts or something. Except, of course, you may say, well, do you want to look at presidential order? Then there are also issues like, when you look into as I mentioned before, WTO, the issue of non-discrimination, the issue of national treatment, because that operates at the level of states, and there are issues of most favored nation. So you've got all those three clauses that people are going to be looking into now to see whether they are going to be rushing to tribunal at the WTO level. And then you have ILO. So you would expect that Minister for Trade and Industry need to be in the consultation team to actually advise. And then the Foreign Affairs need to be in the consultation to tell about ECOWAS, because we are bound by treaty there on free movement of goods, services, right of establishment and capital. So, they need to know, because they will handle the fallout when there's a reaction at that level. And then, of course, the Minister of Employment, because of ILO commitments. And in fact, going down to NIDO, that is the Nigerian diaspora, because the diaspora could be a major impact that we never thought about. Say, for example, if you have 100,000 expatriates in the country, and you are collecting $10,000 from them, that is how many? Just $1 billion. But look at 20 to $25 billion that come from diaspora. How could it be impacted? If America and Europe decides to reciprocate and do this, many of our people will lose their jobs, because the question is, would you like to pay $10,000 to keep a Nigerian in a job in America? Of course, the answer will be no. Because others are going to protest. Why would the employer pay extra 10,000 naira for a Nigerian to be in their employment? So we have to look at, that is why all the key stakeholders who are going to be saddled with having to defend this, or they must be involved in the consultation. And I have to tell you this, we are not losing any face. There's nothing wrong with the president saying, great stuff, but let's give another 6 months to actually look into it clear. But the last administration did that. When the AFCTA came in, they said, okay, many people protested. 1 year was taken to go around and digest it, make sure everybody is on the same page, and then we signed, and then we moved on.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. We'll look at some of the issues that you've raised in greater detail as we go on with the discussion. But let's come to Engineer Umar Binder and ask your opening comments on the matter at hand, the Expatriate Employment Levy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the first feeling I had when I saw this was that actually our country, or the present government, is on a very committed, what should I say, drive to introduce policies that can shake the system to perform better. And what I mean by that is expatriate quotas normally affects technology-based jobs, jobs that are very difficult to get Nigerians who are not just qualified for, but experienced to do, to deliver the quality required at the price that is reasonable on a continuous basis. So, and every country that is deploying this expatriate quota, I mean, if you look at through history, profs will know we used to do that in the education sector, we do that in telecommunications, we do that in the power sector, we do that in most sectors where you get intense technology-driven goods and services for Nigerians. Now, I'm sure the minister must have reflected a lot on the desire of the country to make sure that our possibly 250 to 270 universities are responding to the production of the critical mass of Nigerians in these technical areas. So there has to be a relationship somehow that the education sector and this particular policy should know what kind of Nigerians with their qualities and professionals that we are producing. And then other institutions will have to overlap. The Industrial Training Fund that has been mandated over a long period of time to produce from low level to the highest level of industrial workers. Then you have NOTAB that is regulating the inflow of foreign technology in this country. But all of them are supposed to align themselves to a policy whereby Nigeria now is opening its eyes to say, look, we can do this software works, we can do this power sector works, we can do this oil and gas works, we can do all these things. So therefore, if you narrow and pressurize this particular part of the whole system, that means you are making it a bit, in quote, difficult for companies to hire experts. It means on the other side there should be a safety valve for such companies to have it very easy to get similar or same or even higher competencies of Nigerians. So it's a very exciting policy. Like the minister said, it will create jobs. It will create not just jobs, it will create high-wage jobs if we're very serious about it. Two, we have to be very, very well coordinated. Coordinated in the sense that we must have data of the people who are coming in. We must have data of the people that we have and constantly be monitoring and evaluating to compare whether actually Nigerians are taking over these jobs or not. We have to also compare, do we have very firm policies and energy to, everybody talks about understudying an expatriate, but do we actually have the energy to say that this guy is employed like the way we see Asian countries do? Once you are employed as an expatriate, you have a follow. You don't carry a shallow person to understudy somebody who is very strong, who has been 40 years in the industry. You carry somebody who is close to that so that as the expatriate is edging off, you now have a replacement. So there are so many overlapping things. Riding on what Prof said, I have a feeling that it's either this has been thought of or done or discussed such that the implementation is carrying that experience, and if not, it is very, very important to actually check out the institutions that Nigeria has in this regard. For example, I know when I was in NOTAB, Ministry of Interior does not consult NOTAB to say that, hey, NOTAB, do we actually have these kind of competencies for us before we approve the number of expatriates that this particular company is requesting? No, we don't have communication at all. When we are the technology transfer and the technology, all these agreements, we are the regulators for over 35 years. You know, so this type of interactions has to be intensified. Then the Minister of ICT has to come in, not just because of the ICT, but putting up databases dashboards to see the dynamics of these quotas, how they are doing it, the services, who is understudying, is it actually, so all these matrices of the important points in implementing the policy are very, very important. But yeah, it's a welcome idea.
Right, thank you so much. Again, you also have thrown up a number of issues which require further exploration. We'll get down to that. But let's come to Professor Adeni, who will avail us of his thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. But I think the first thing that occurs to me is that from what I've checked from my examinations, I discovered that Nigeria is not the first country to impose this kind of levy. We have it across the world. Japan is doing it. Singapore is involved. Saudi Arabia is involved. Yemen, Bahrain, and some other countries. Not just to generate revenue, but to develop local content. Grow their economy through enhancing the capacity, or the opportunity, or creating opportunities for their locals, to get employed. So that Nigeria is developing the courage, to bring it about. I think it's a welcome development, like my colleagues have said. And I understand it's not just starting in the Tinubu administration. It has taken time for it to get to this stage, from the period of maybe, if not Jonathan, maybe the President Buhari administration about 4 or 5 years ago. It's just that it's just transpiring that it's not coming to fruition now in terms of implementation. And of course, when we talk about retaliation, I'm not really scared about retaliation. First, because Nigeria is not the first country to do it, and second, because if you look at the class of people, that are exchanged between countries that will fear might retaliate, and the class of people that come here as expatriates, there's actually a disparity. Those who come here as expatriates are really elites. We're talking about elite, those who do elite jobs, high-paying jobs. The expats, not the expats anyway. Highly skilled people. Who could ordinarily afford, to pay this levy that we are talking about. And of course, those who go out from Nigeria are not necessarily expats. They are people who are just trying to get by, and most of the time they populate the underground economy, or jobs that you put at the lower rung of the ladder in the countries that they go to. And if you look at it, we are coming. If an expatriate is coming to this country, what happens in the first instance? You pay CPAC, which is about $1,000 to $2,000. And after that, you start working, maybe in one state or the other, and the other thing that you pay is a personal income tax that you and I pay. They do not pay any other thing. But if you go to other countries, I've been privileged to live in the UK, I know the number of taxes that I pay. Here we're not talking about tax, we're talking about levy. In the UK, you pay council tax, you pay television license, you pay road tax, and many taxes like that. We would not complain in those countries because the monies were generated are properly used for social infrastructure, and you see the productivity of the resources that government is getting from the people. Perhaps our advocacy, like I've said in previous interventions on this matter, should be focused on judicious use of the resources that will come from this income when it eventually manifests. But for them, those who come, they work in states. Personal income tax, where does it go to? From my understanding, it goes to the state. The federal government hardly gets anything. And of course, the levy we're talking about is going to the federal government, not just the state. And of course, with this kind of levy, that only the employers will be paying, not necessarily the direct expatriates, the individual expatriates, but only those who are bringing them will be responsible for paying it. I think it becomes more meaningful, especially in a situation where, many of these companies are known to exceed their quotas. Quite a number of them are infracting on the laws of this country because of our weak regulations, and exploding in expatriates, so-called expatriates. We'll find them these days in hospitality business, in supermarket business, in jobs that Nigerians can ordinarily do. So when you have this kind of levy, it's likely to discourage them from violating our laws in a situation where pointers can be made at brazen violation. And because of the weakness of our system, like I said, the fact that our citizens compromise, upon inducement, enforcements, are weak in terms of Immigration Act, in terms of local content. And of course, laws change with time, and laws change in accordance with realities. So if the reality at this time is saying that we should have another kind of law that will complement the Local Content Act, that will complement the Immigration Act, irrespective of the weaknesses we have identified in previous laws, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But the concern overall should be, government to be mindful of what they do with the resources, because, and that's what is deepening creating the crisis of trust, where concerns are rising in sections. We have heard from MAN, we have heard from NECA, and the concerns mainly centers around the absence of consultation. Perhaps there should have been a stakeholder engagement, in advance of this policy. But that does not detract, from the quality, the validity, the productivity of the policy, as the case could be. All we need is to have the courage, because we're not the first, and I'm not sure we're going to be the last.
All right, thanks so much, Prof. But, part of this levy, part of the fallouts that have been touted is that when it comes to competencies, and Engineer Binder started talking about that, in such a way where these companies are only allowed to employ expatriates in jobs in Nigeria where it is certified that such competencies are lacking. There are people who tell you there are Nigerians all over the world who are doing great things. Bring them back to do those great things in the country.
Correct. The thing is, first of all, I support this, to the fullest. But I'm mindful that work-based training, if you're talking about training people in a company for that job, it has to be in the context of a work-based training. So it's not like, okay, bring the money, then carry them, go to University of Maiduguri and train. No. Here is a job that is critical, high technology content, and a lot of it are in the infrastructure area. And sometimes we can't escape it because some of them are tied to the loan. If most of our infrastructure jobs are actually loan, and then you have countries funding the project. So you have, EPC plus finance. So that company is the one going to, and the finance is flowing in because of the line of credit. You can't throw away the workers. So if you want them to actually get the relevant experience to be able to perform or whatever, it has to be about where is your employment development plan. If you check how the local content people do their own, they interrogate the employment plan to be sure that it's more of a development is available, so that you can actually see who you are coming to replace. They'll see it, and then when it's time for renewal, you go and so you get it back into the frame. So for monitoring and evaluation. So it's not just issue it to them and then you come back and collect money, and there's a disconnect between the actual objective or getting somebody to understudy and then develop that competence and sit into that job. So we need to tie these two things together. That's a little concern. But I like the idea that we need to get more people qualified and able to.
All right. Well, we have a number of reports that speak to the subject matter. Let's start with this one from Kanu.
Is a huge takeaway from the ongoing economic reforms embarked upon by the present administration to bring an initiative into the nation's labor market, ensuring equity between economic growth and social welfare. It will also serve as a springboard of closing gaps between expatriates and indigenous expats in the country.
So the advantage of training the required labor we have here in Nigeria, the advantage is it cannot even be overemphasized, because all what they get as an income, it is going to be circulated and spent locally here. It will impact on the employment, it will impact on the productivity, it will impact on the GDP itself.
The concept of this policy is a win-win to the country, especially now that the economy is undergoing turbulent time.
The expatriate employment levy, experts say, will be a mandatory document that will be required to be carried by every eligible expatriate at the time of entry into the country or out of the country. This is a levy that will have to be paid by hiring firms who are hiring foreigners. The question is, how will this policy impact the firms?
The levy will of course increase our cost of operations. It will increase our daily acquiring of expatriates from outside the country. And of course, we will naturally, Economics 0101, it will make us transfer it to our customers.
When implemented, the policy is expected to diminish reliance on foreign skills and encourage firms to prioritize hiring locals. However, these firms are calling for more time so that there will be adequate transfer of knowledge from the expatriates to the locals.
All right, the next report is from Abuja.
Government's introduction of the Expatriate Employment Levy, which was launched on Tuesday, 27th February 2024, has continued to dominate public discussions, attracting commendation for the federal government.
That policy is a very great policy that will have multiplier effect, and then will streamline the people who are coming to commit illegality.
The policy, financial experts in Ogun State acknowledge, is a game changer, capable of turning around the fortunes of the country, especially in the areas of employment generation for Nigerians in juicy multinational companies and boosting the revenue base of the country.
To encourage foreign entities to recruit Nigerians and have succession plan.
While those expatriates are here, some Nigerians will be working with them. They are on the study, they are doing apprenticeship.
As the money comes into the cover of government will now, plow it back into our economy and ensure that we have good roads, ensure that we have good water around.
In as much as residents are optimistic that the policy will boost the economy of Nigeria, they however express their reservation over the mode and method of implementation.
Some of our people, they will take advantage and begin to visit this organization. We want to cancel. These are issues and conflict between agencies of government.
The respondents appealed to stakeholders, including state governments and other agencies in charge of its implementation, to support the federal government for the success of the program. In Abuja, Hakim Jimo.
Right, back here in the studio, Engineer Bindir, we saw some of the respondents there. Let's even take it to the level of where we saw an airline operator hinting that, well, in the long run, they could pass on the costs to their customers.
Yeah, I think there are many layers to this, the implementation of this policy. In my experience, first, most, if not all, industrial-based companies operating in Nigeria are actually Nigerian companies registered in the Corporate Affairs Commission. But you will find that the shareholding, has got the foreign shareholding component and then the local shareholding component. And that joint venture agreement has it very, very clearly on even how to employ the top people running the company. And in most cases, the technology services directors, and the finances, these two, the guy who is running the factory, making sure that everything works well, adhering to international standards, quality and everything, you will find that the expatriate component will say, this must be ours. Why? Because it's a brand driver. And if you get it wrong, it's a brand breaker. And then they can't compete. If they're exporting, they cannot export. If that guy who has not gotten, who has got something like 40, 50 years in the same industry, worked in so many climes and countries, is not here. They actually even have to headhunt for that guy. Secondly, the same thing with finances. The finances in budgeting and calculating, forecasting and everything is highly specialized. You find that the foreign investor will say this one is also ours. In most cases, you find that the Nigerian side will take the admin person who is, to do with staff, discipline and so on and so forth. So this is the first layer. But you and I, we also go to bakeries and we see some foreigners in bakeries selling bread, So again, there are different layers of expertise. So you tend to wonder, how do some companies get these quotas in the first place? So this is a very serious policy, in my opinion. But we as Nigerians will also have to be very, very serious to review our ways to ensure that the impact of this policy is felt. Number one, we must review our cutting corner system, whereby anybody can get any expatriate quota as he wants. If you just pin it on the levy, There are people who can pay the levy. They can flood you up with a lot of it. There are companies that I have been to monitor technology transfer agreements of no type. And I've found truck drivers are also foreigners. Truck drivers. Forming, cement mixers and so on and so forth. Foreigners are busy doing that. And I tend to shake my hands to say, is it that, the expatriate quota is easy to get? Or is it that the company is not intending to employ Nigerians? I actually inquired, and one of the managers said, if you employ Nigerians at this level, they will come here and form a union, and before you know, there will be strikes, and so on and so forth. So we want to run away from it. It's better we get expatriates because they don't have any unionism, and if they try anything through a vendor, we can kick them out. So this policy is a good one, but I hope in the implementation of these policies, we will line up all the stakeholders. We will even check ourselves for these cutting corners, And when it comes to technology transfer, training, this is not academic training. This is not paper training. This is not a classroom training. If you go to a manufacturer for aluminum sheets or whatever, you need to know the properties of these materials, how they behave, the product's quality, how do you do quality assessment, and so on and so forth. This takes time. And before even you get the person to agree to come to our country to work, they have to headhunt him and give him extra packages before he actually agrees to. But the success of the company depends on that guy. So there are so many tentacles that we have to look at, and I hope we do look at this, but certainly it's a good one. And we must also understand that this kind of the highest level of experts being hired to work, this is not like a developing country culture thing. Some of the blue chip companies that are performing in our country, producing products that can be exported to anywhere, is not a joke. You know what I mean? It's not something that you can just line up somebody to say, study this guy for 5 years, and then you knock him off. It's possible, but we have to be very, very serious. We have to invest very well. We have to invest in our technical training. We have to invest in our tracking system. And I'm sure if we can do that, the benefit of this policy is somewhere in the future, rather than just now as people are discussing about yes or no's.
Professor Adini, you say you're not really worried about the possibility of reciprocity by these countries, given the huge numbers of Nigerians who are working in other countries. But is there a chance that that could also be a way of holding Nigeria to ransom? That's one part of it. And then on the other side, talking about the transfer of competencies, people who run the study, and yes, you have drawn attention to the fact that it's not even the high-tech jobs alone that you find expatriates. You find them as shopkeepers and things like that. Yes. So, but there is an existing quota system regulation.
That's right.
How would that fit into this now?
Okay, good. You see, I think engineer alluded to it, how we're able to have expatriates working in bakeries, producing bread. And you'll be wondering, did somebody travel from a far country to come and become a baker here? As respectable as that job could be, but again, you wonder again if those kind of jobs cannot be reserved for Nigerians. I remember the other day, the chairman of Senate Committee on Interior, Senator Adams Oshomolu, said, on the floor of the Senate or somewhere, that some foreigners or foreign companies are bringing in prisoners to come and work in Nigeria. How is this so? How are they able to circumvent the process, to violate our process, to bring in these levels of people? It's just because the system is weak. The regulatory mechanisms might be there through the Immigration Act, through the local content law, but again, implementation is weak. And that's why we're saying that this one, as good as it is, it may also not work if implementation is weak, And of course, there's a level in which we can say that our system is being abused. People are taking advantage of the weaknesses, they are cashing in, and of course they are benefiting in different ways, because when they make these resources overall, then hardly would you say that the bulk of their resources are left in this country? Of course, there's evidence, there's huge repatriation going on. And what happens at the end of the day, it puts pressure on the scarce foreign exchange. And when there's pressure, of course, it affects us further, which is a contradistinction to exactly what the government is trying to deal with, the forex crisis, as the case could be. And we have to remember again that, like I think I mentioned it earlier, laws change, societies look at their system, how laws that are in existence have worked, and if they have not worked, they see how they can tweak it, so that they can increase effectivity. The UK, I keep referring to it because they are always in the news, recently came out with a law, an immigration law, restricting, those who want to school there, maybe postgraduate degree or any kind of degree, from bringing their spouses, because they've seen that that's a route through which immigration and settlement is actually negotiated. And they keep changing these laws just because they want to regulate their system. They want to make it more manageable. They're looking at the year 5 years ahead. They're looking at 10 years ahead. And we see it in other countries as well. They keep reviewing these things so that they can strengthen their society for the good of their own people. And if we see other countries doing it, there's nothing wrong with us also doing this kind of thing. And that's why I was talking about the courage of implementation. If any company, an expatriate company, is actually serious, whether local or foreign, you have to be concerned about compliance with the laws of your country. And without prejudice to what my colleagues have said, and with due respect to multilateral agreements, international trade agreements, I also do know that these international agreements are contingent, on the effect on the peace, the stability of a sovereign state. If a sovereign state is not effective, if its systems are not working well, there's no way that multilateral agreement can function. Sovereigns, have to tighten their own system to make it functional for other countries, to trade peacefully with them, compliant with the expectations of WTO, of AFTA, and all of that. And that's why we talk sometimes about the crisis of jurisprudence in the implementation of some of these multilateral agreements. You manage jurisprudence. So if this is one more jurisprudence that we're going to manage, so be it. If we have the courage, if we have the determination, and that's why we don't agree with what man said, that it is punitive. It is not about punishment, but it's just about strengthening your own control mechanism and helping your population that are grossly unemployed, grossly underemployed, having jobs, that locals can do, being taken over by foreigners. And of course, do not forget, this has been alluded to severally as well, that the immigration law says that, technical experts who are coming from abroad are given condition, train locals. How many of them comply with this? Rather, you see them even bringing their wards, their relations, their families from outside to populate this job at the expense of locals. And of course, even indigenous company owners are beginning to ape and idolize the practices of these foreigners. You see hoteliers, excuse me, hoteliers, recruiting foreigners to come and manage those companies, those outfits for them, on the ground that there is no trust. You can't trust the average Nigerian, or the average Nigerian will do this, will do this or that. And of course, these things have to be managed. They have to be dealt with. We cannot run away from them, as the case could be.
Professor Kenife, again, I'd like to return to the matter of those high-tech based jobs. And again, put that against the aviation industry, for instance. We had an example there. While this policy would bring about the transfer of competencies, skills, and all that, again, it's been alluded here on this program that some companies are big enough to pay, but then some might pass on whatever they're paying to the end user, the consumer.
Definitely. Let's take, for example, tied loans. Well, implement that, that's fine. The company that is dealing will simply reprice, and then they'll add it to the loan, and we will pay. And then we'll plus interest, because it's a tied loan. So we will still pay those loans back. But what now happens is that they may not just, if it's costing a company $3 million every year for the top up, they may double it anyway, and then it goes back to load the contract, and we're still going to pay them plus interest over whatever period. So those ones, you will have that pass through. It's because we didn't have the money. And I think you need to also understand that when you have price, because this is now about price, in every price consideration, you must look at demand and supply. Don't take the position that we are such an investment heaven that everybody's running to come in here. That's not the case. You see our FDI is declining. You see we're having to borrow much money that we use for our infrastructure. So there will be that measure of transfer of those additional costs. Then in the context of if you come into the open and look at aviation and then the technology-based companies, especially the fintechs and all of that, yeah, that's a slightly different story because they have a market here. And we don't have to owe them. They need to pull the traffic in and out, so they will have to deal with that. The fintechs are looking at 225 million people here that are using. So there is a market there that drives their interest. So they may well have to take that, bite that bullet. We want to develop our people, but that notwithstanding, we always had this thing that we have extremely good policies in our country. The devil is always in the implementation. I started by saying, just look at what they have done in the local content in the oil industry. These guys make them bring a plan that they monitor and they follow through. And that goes to what Binde is saying. We have to look about how we're going to implement and make sure that we can hold people to account. But even before then, I started by saying, when you are doing a strategy, you got to involve all the relevant people involved. You don't just drop it on everybody and then expect everybody to bite the bullet. You have to involve people, because in the end of the day, if any of these risks that we have identified crystallizes, you will see Ministry of Trade and Industry running to the WTO to defend what they don't even know. They say they didn't take part, they don't understand. You see Foreign Affairs running to ECOWAS to talk about the fallout. Ghana has blocked us, and then would they be doing that? And then you see the ILO, Minister for Trade, going to answer on ILO. You see all these people. You see diaspora people beginning to... So all of these people are stakeholders. They have to be involved. And then you give the evidence that immigration don't even talk to you, ab initio. So we have fallouts that could crystallize anytime. And that means having too many balls in the air. And it gives more headache to a president that really wants to do certain things. But we need to involve people so that they will all... Nobody's talking about where does that money go, that extra one. That is, what role have every person have to play in making sure that we implement this, we understand what is going on. Look, in 2011, 2012, I was the DFI, the UK government DFI, the trade advisor to the Nigerian government. So that 1 year, I husbanded Nigerians' accession to the WTO trade agreement, trade facilitation agreement. I had 46 agencies, trade-related agencies, with all the development partners, all of them round the table every month, just making sure that they all understand what we are doing. All of us go together to the seaport, to the airport, to the border, everywhere to see ourselves. And when we signed that thing, that wasn't an issue. But when we rushed AFCTA, trouble came. We suspended 1 year. And so this is what happens. When you don't involve all the stakeholders, nobody knows what is going on.
And in Abinde, interagency conflicts, it's part of it. Someone mentioned the fact that, yes, this is supposed to be driven by the Nigerian Immigration Service, but then NIS cannot be in isolation. There are other government agencies who are performing certain functions to do with regulating the expatriate quota space.
Well, I think because, like I said before, expatriate quota are in layers. And the basic definition of expatriate quota is a percentage of your total labor, and you go to request that I need these people to help me to execute my job. And most of these industries or companies that are private sector owned, many are in the works sector, construction sector, where you need design engineering, guidelines on how to do things properly for you to get the quality And in most cases, this type of sector are very, very aligned to government jobs. So, and literally, it is only Ministry of Interior that actually the company go to with a piece of paper to get this approval. You know, but when it comes to the payment of their own emoluments through foreign exchange, CBN comes in, because that is where you now have to say this is an expatriate, these are the terms and conditions of their employment, and they have the right to repatriate 1/4 of their money. So CBN comes in the regulation of the transfers. But there's a way out, there's a window. Companies will adjust. The window is expatriate quota is for a continuously, in quote, permanent job, whereas consultants are actually short term. It has absolutely nothing to do with Ministry of Interior. I can get a job from the federal government to do this and that, and I can be able to package that as part of the contract, and the government will pay. And I would bring the consultant to come and advise me on the process to let him. He will spend 6 months and he will go. That is not expatriate quota. He is not going to pay this levy. Are you with me? The one that is going to pay this levy is that traditional employment. I am employed as a director on so salary level, and you are going to be here for this period of time. So I think, number one, Ministry of Interior is directly, and they have a committee, I think, of various institutions that actually come together to decide this. But certainly, like I mentioned,